What's going on, sports fans? Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another episode of Fantasy Haus Live. Now, this week we got the usual coming right at you, which is the weekly review. Then we got some updated power rankings, and then we got the usual preview for the next week coming up at you. As always, thank you so much for tuning in, hanging out, and coming to vibe for a little bit. You guys are amazing. Much love as always. And without too much further ado, let's get into it. Alright, here's the Week 8 review. Like I said, it was a pretty big week. So we'll just get right into the nitty-gritty of it, shall we? In our first game, and probably in one of the biggest scorelines I've seen it to date in this league, Team Nugent was picking up a huge win and continuing this dominant performance that he's been having this season, picking up a win at 200. At the first time I've seen 200 points be broken this season, and winning at a score margin of 206 to 120. In our next game, we had our third overall top dog in Chicago Deviants, dropping a game to the Bajayjays, who were finally able to tie their record up at 4-4 with a final score of 145 to 86. In our third matchup, we had CeeDeez Nuts able to get the big win over Champ Cheese by a score of 181 to 102. In our fourth matchup of the week, we had the Lame Tanks and Destinooooooooo, with Destino able to pick up that win and cruising to a record of 5-3 cruising to a new record of 5-3 and winning the matchup this week by a score of 120 to 106. And last, but most certainly not least, Deebos Nutz is able to get a pretty swift win against Team Breeki, who falls to 1-7 on the year and continues to ride the struggle bus. That matchup ended in a final score of 137 to 99. But we're not done yet. We are actually going to look into it a little bit more. So we'll do... Alright, so our first matchup that we're going to look into is, of course, with our top dogs. So, Team Nugent, and Bob's Burgers is the one that we're going to look at first. Let's take a look at how these players did this week. So we had Tom Brady throwing up 20 points in the it was only a 6 point, less than one score loss to Baltimore. While Jared Goff, who, even though the Lions are continuing to have a pretty tough season, they are actually throwing up a lot of points. Goff actually going off for 21 points this week. In the moving on into the running backs, we had Christian McCaffrey. Ooh, looky here. He's in his Niner gear. Oh, he's got the headband and everything. Good for him. Anyways, he was able to drop 40 points in that huge win over the Rams, while Najee Harris was only able to get 12 points in the win over Philly. Moving into the running backs, the running back number 2, then Tony Pollard had a monster day as well, dropping 33 points in the big win over Chicago, while Jamal Williams also had a very productive day with DeAndre Swift out? I can't remember. Oh no. Wait. Russell, so DeAndre Swift to actually return. So DeAndre Swift returned, and even with him coming back, Jamal Williams is still able to throw up a 20 point game. Moving into the wide receivers, we have Mr. CeeDee Lamb. McCaffrey got a freaking triple crown on Sunday. Yeah, dude, insane. I think what was it first? He's not the first player in history to do it, is he? He's just or is he the first Niner to do it? Absolutely bonkers, dude. Passing TD, rushing TD, receiving TD. And you know what that resulted in? 40 fucking points, bro. Actually, I kind of want to see. That's a good point. How did that actually... Let's see. So we have 18 carries, 94 yards. Oh, it doesn't show. I would just say I would love to love to see love to see the passing stats. Interesting. No, since like 09 or something. That makes more sense. What else was here? Oh yeah. So we had CeeDeez dropping 18 points in the big win over Chicago, while Scary Terry was only able to get 16 in the 1-point win over the Colts. In the next matchup, we had AJ Brown dropping 39 points in the win over Pittsburgh, while Christian Kirk only able to muster up 7 points in the loss to Denver. Moving into the battle of the tight ends, we had Mr. Bobby Tunyon, who, you know, having a down year for sure. Only able to get 8.5 points in the blowout loss to Buffalo, while TJ Hawkinson, newly acquired Minnesota tight end, was able to get 11 points in the winning effort over Arizona. 1 for 1 for like 30-ish yards, and at TD, I was like, so that's actually a pretty decent stat line. In the flex position, we got Mr. T. Higgins dropping 13 points and that was a pretty much blowout effort to Cleveland there, while Chris Olave continuing to have a actually very productive rookie season here, getting 10.2 points in the win over Las Vegas. Moving into the defenses, we have the Cowboys able to get 10 points in, like I said, that big win over Chicago, while the Saints were able to get 14 in that shutout win over the Raiders. So wow, excuse me. Oh, excuse me again. So the defense is coming in big here this week. Then moving into the kickers, we had Nick Folk going off for 21 points in the win over the Jets, while Justin Tucker is only able to get points despite being, you know, Justin Tucker, in the win over Tampa. But my lord, just the stat line, just literally pretty much everyone but Bobby Tunyon went off, but it was still able to get just over 200 points. Sheesh. You see, 1 for 1, 3 for 3. Yeah, he hit them all. So he went 5 for 5. Because 3 of them were from 40 to 49, so those were, and you get more points for, you know, the distance. That's absolutely nutty. Do the review for a second. So then the next matchup we're going to take a quick little look at is the number 3 overall top dogs, Deviants, as they take the L against the Bajayjays. Now, let's take a look at how that went down. Okay. So, we had Lamar Jackson going off for 24 points in the winning effort over Tampa, while Mr. Kirk Cousins going off for 25 points in the big win over Arizona. Kirk is actually having a fantastic season, much like the Vikings are. They're looking like the real deal right now. The NFC North looking like pretty much a crapshoot apart from them. Anyways, moving on into the running backs, we have Leonard Fournette, who's continuing to have, you know, he's, despite all the efforts of, or all the, I guess, the follies of how Tampa's been doing this year, Fournette's actually been having a pretty consistent season. Able to get 14 points this week despite losing to Baltimore, while King Henry, who, you know, he was not quite looking like himself early in the season. Then again, a lot of that Tennessee team just did not look very good earlier in the season, but now they're really starting to come around. King Henry, you know, showing why the crown is on his head, as he's able to get 35 big ones in in that win over Houston. Moving straight on into the next the next set of running backs, we had Miles Sanders, who's had a pretty productive season for a Philly team that is doing outstanding, able to get 13 points in that win over Pittsburgh, while Alvin Kamara, who was quiet all season, finally just erupts and drops 42 points. I think it was like, what, four teddies, something like that? No, it went out for 3 touchdowns. So we had, did he have 2 receiving? Yeah, 2 receiving touchdowns. Sheesh. Then in the wide receivers, we had Robert Woods, only able to get 2 points in that win over Houston, while Michael Pitti City was able to get 12 points in the loss to Washington. In the next battle of the wide receivers, we had George Pickens dropping a straight goose egg in the loss to Philly, while Cortland Sutton, despite Russell Wilson playing up and down and very mediocre this season, only able to get 2.3 points. Into the tight end matchup, we had Hunter Henry able to get 3.2 points in the win over the Jets, while Taysom Hill does a little bit better of a stat line, not by much though, getting 8 points in the win over Las Vegas. Moving into the flex position, we had Romeo Doubs able to get 16 points in that losing effort to Buffalo, while Raheem Mostert only able to get 7 points in the win over Detroit. In our defensive matchup, we had the Patriots able to get 8 points in the win over the Jets, while, hey, conveniently enough, the Jets were able to get 10 points on the Patriots. Then, finally, in our kicker matchup, we had Mason Crosby able to get 4 points despite a big loss in Buffalo, and Evan McPherson dropping a goose egg, getting no points scored at all despite losing in Cleveland. So we got Champ Cheese and CeeDeez Nuts. In which case, like I said, CeeDeez Nuts was able to get was able to get quite the big victory over me this week. Having a rough season, for sure. Then this week we had Kyler Murray able to drop 27 points despite losing to Minnesota, while Tua able to get 33 points while continuing his triumphant return from injury, able to get 33 in the win over Detroit. Moving into our first set of running backs, we have Dalvin Cook able to get 25 points in the win over Arizona, while Joe Mixon was only able to get 12 despite losing in Cleveland. Into our second set of running backs, we have Saquon Barkley continuing to have the stellar bounce back season, dropping 15.2 points despite losing in Seattle, while Dameon Pierce having a breakout season as a rookie here, able to get 14 points despite losing to Tennessee. Moving into our first set of wide receivers, we got Justin Jefferson, who was able to get 15 points in the win over Arizona, while Cooper Kupp able to get 22 despite losing to San Francisco. Then in the next set, we had Mr. Gabe Davis able to get 5 points in the he was only able to get 5 points despite a huge blowout win over Green Bay in Buffalo, while DeAndre Hopkins on the other side continuing to stay productive, getting 33 points, picking up right where he left off with his rapport with Mr. Kyler Murray in that that loss to Minnesota. Tyler Higbee, this was actually a bit of a down game for him, as he was only able to get 3.5 points in the loss to San Francisco, while Kyle Pitts, who was pretty much invisible all season thus far, finally able to get on the stat sheet, dropping 19 points this week in the win over Carolina. Then moving into our flex position, we got Mr. Devontae Smith able to get 7 points this week, despite a pretty much blowout win over Pittsburgh, while Mike Evans was able to get 18 points in the close losing effort to Baltimore. Moving into the defenses, we have the Raiders, who pretty much would have been better to go with any other defense, but the Raiders only able to get -1 points because they got shut out against the New Orleans, so that didn't help at all. While the Eagles, on the other hand, just put a hurting on Pittsburgh, so they were able to get 13. Then lastly, we have Brandon McManus able to get 3 points in the win over Jacksonville, while Young Ho Koo able to get 14 in the big win over Carolina. Okay, then we got Lame Tanks and Destino. So in this matchup, we had, starting off, Joe Burrow dropping 15 points, who obviously, as you all can probably tell with your eyes, that Cincy not doing so good this season, dropping, taking the L against Cleveland, Joe Burrow in that effort, able to get 15. Well, if you look across the way, Josh Allen continuing to have a stellar season, able to get 19 points in the big win over Green Bay. In the matchup of the wide receivers, running backs, we had Nick Chubb, who just went off, going off for 25 points. While on the opposite side, Mr. Jordan Taylor, the number one pick in a lot of people's drafts, only got 5.6 points this week. He has been injured, and I think he had just come back from injury too, which is shocking. So, let's see. Moving into the running back number 2s, we got Josh Jacobs, who after a huge game last week came back, crashing back to earth here a little bit with a 7.2 output score from in that losing effort to New Orleans. Like I said, pretty much everyone got denied in that game. Let's see. Oh yeah, Mr. DeAndre Swift was able to get 14 points in his return. It was actually pretty modest. Obviously, anytime you're able to get a player that's able to get into double-digit points, that's always good. Moving into the wide receivers, and Adam Thielen was able to get 12.7 points in that win over Arizona, while Amari Cooper continuing to prove a lot of people wrong, including myself, who did not think that he was going to produce there in Cleveland, but has been able to do so. Able to drop 22 points in the win over Cincy. Moving into the next set of wide receivers, Tyler Lockett able to go off for 15 points in that 27-13 win over the Giants. While Jerry Jeudy was also able to get a kind of similar stat line, just slightly better. Able to get 18.3. 18.3 points over the win over Jacksonville. Then in the tight ends, we had Mr. Cole Kmet here, able to get 9.1 points, finally getting his first touchdown of the season in the big blowout loss to Dallas. While George Kittle was able to get 12 points in the big win over the Rams. In the flex positione, we had Mr. Brandon Ayuk go off for 20 points in the win over the Rams, while Devin Singletary able to put up a respectable 9.3 points despite going up against what was supposed to be a very stout against the run defense in Green Bay, but has not been the case. Moving into the defenses here, we had the Ravens able to get 5 points in the big win over Tampa, while the Packers were only able to get 5 points despite the very low effort loss to Buffalo. And then finally, in the battle of the kickers, we had Mr. Brett Maher go for 7 points in the win over Chicago, while Matt Gay only able to get 2 points despite losing to San Francisco. Dino and Lame Tanks. Now we do Deebos Nutz and Mr. Team Breeki. Scroll this down a little bit. So we had this week Jalen Hurts went off again, continuing to have his best season in the NFL, dropping 31 points in the big win over Pittsburgh, while Derek Carr only able to muster up 2.3 points in the very pitiful effort, if you want to call it that, versus the Saints. Moving into the running backs, we had we had Mr. Cam Akers throw up a goose egg because I'm pretty sure he's requesting a trade. So he is not actually, trying to. He doesn't really want to participate in team activities. Moving in, let's see, across the way, Travis Etienne continuing to affirm his spot across on the top of the Jacksonville running back depth chart, dropping 25 points in the loss to Denver. Moving into the RB2s, we have Aaron Jones dropping 19 points and having the much better season than AJ Dillon. Despite losing to Buffalo, able to get 19 points. On the opposite side of things, Michael Carter able to get a pretty solid 10 points from New England. While, and if we move into our wide receivers, Stephon Diggs continuing just to produce week in, week out, able to get 22 points this week, and like I said, the big win over Green Bay. While on the opposite side here, Ty Freak continuing to be one of the best wide receivers in the league despite being traded, dropping 31 points this week in the big win over Detroit. In the wide receiver 2 stats, we got Devontae Adams only able to get 1.2 points in the shutout loss to New Orleans, while Amon-Ra St. Brown, who returned from a concussion, was able to get 13 in the loss to Miami. Moving into tight ends, Pat Freiermuth, who's been the security blanket tight end there in Pittsburgh, able to get 9.7 points despite losing to Philly. And then across the way, you had Mr. Hayden Hurst able to get 8.2 points in the loss to Cleveland. Then moving into the flex position, Allen Robinson was able to get a very respectable 10.4 points, even though it was a losing effort against San Fran for the Rams. Then while Jalen, Mr. doing that waddle, was able to get 30 points in the big win over Detroit. I think we left off with Mr. Jalen Waddle going off for 30 points in that win over Detroit. Now we're going to go into the defenses here, where the Bills, despite putting the hurt on the Packers, only able to get 14 points. That's not even what that says. Only able to get 4 points. While the Niners were able to get 5 points, so pretty much equal stat line there in the win over the Rams. Then, lastly, Daniel Carlson, or I should say, lastly, our kickers. Daniel Carlson throwing up yet another goose egg in the shutout loss to the Saints, while Ryan Suckup able to get 10 points despite losing to Baltimore. Okay. Was that the last one for the reviews? Yep. Okay. So now we are going to switch it up to the power rankings. And there actually was some shifting this week. And here they are. I present to you the power rankings. If I hit the button. Okay. So, as you can see, starting at the very top, Nuge taking home that number 1 overall top dog spot and just marking it down as his own, sitting at a sweet 6-2. Then in the 2 spot, you got Mr. Deebos Nutz sitting there holding it down as well, also sitting at a record of 6-2. Then we got a brand new newcomer to the top dog sitting in that 3 spot. You got Destinooooooooo, who is sitting at now with a record of 5-3. While the Chicago Deviants, who have been kind of fallen from grace here, have fallen throughout the top dogs here, dropping down to the 4 spot, with a record of 5-3. Then let's see, we got CeeDeez Nuts able to move up to the 5th spot with a nice record of 4-4. Moving up to the 6th spot, we got Bajayjays, who also has a record of 4-4, and surprisingly enough, also with a record of 4-4, was Bob's Burgers, who pulls into that 7th spot. Dropping into that 8th seed is Champ Cheese, sitting at a record of 3-8, while the Lame Tanks able to pick up or take another loss, dropping their record to 2-6. While Team Breeki picks up another loss as well, dropping them to 1-7 on the season, making Lame Tanks and Team Breeki our 2 dumpster fires of the season thus far. That is our Week 8 Power Rankings. It's usually the quickest little segment, just because it's quickly reading how everything shook out. And with the, with obviously the hot and cold arrows, it kind of helps tell you where everyone's been. So now, the last thing we will go into is the preview for the week. In which case, I present to you the Week 9 preview. So, in our first matchup, we got number 1 overall top dog, Team Nugent, looking to keep that momentum going against the 4th overall, the 4th seeded Chicago Deviants, who are looking to kind of right the ship, kind of claim their spot in the top dogs. In our matchup number 2, we got the number 2 overall top dog in Deebos Nutz, looking to take on Bajayjays, who just slid into that 6th spot, looking coming hot off of a win last week. Then we got in our 3rd overall matchup, we've got the Bob's Burgers sitting at a record of 4-4, taking on our number 3 overall top dog and the newest top dog, might I add, in Destinooooooooo. In our 4th matchup of the week, we have the Lame Tanks sitting at a record of 2-6, taking on the 5th seeded CeeDeez Nuts, and last and probably least, we got Champ Cheese, who is continuing their very terrible fall from grace against a barely alive Team Breeki, who is just looking to pick up another win and stop their losing streak. Now, let's dive into just a little closer, shall we? So we'll do this. And we'll go into... break it down. Okay. Oh shoot, what was our first match? I forgot. Oh, that's funny because it just said it. So we'll do our first preview will be Team Nugent and Chicago Deviants. So, boom. Okay. Let's minimize this a little bit. Okay, here we go. So this week we've got Tom Brady and the Rams taking on... Oh, Tom Brady and the Rams? Is that what I just said? No, I meant Tom Brady and the Bucks taking on the Rams versus Lamar Jackson and the Ravens taking on New Orleans. Oof. I gotta take Lamar Jackson on this one. LJ MVP. Hopefully he will dominate them. I know New Orleans just shut out the Raiders, but the Raiders have been kind of different. They're a different team. They've been kind of struggling this season. So I think Lamar's going to be able to throw up the better stat line there. Moving into the first set of running backs, we have Antonio Gibson in Washington going up against Minnesota versus Leonard Fournette. And like I just said, Tampa going against the Rams. The Rams not quite as scary as a defense like they were a year ago when they won the Super Bowl. However, I think Washington is still running a more running back by committee sort of approach, while Leonard Fournette still is going to be that running back one. Despite the woes of Tampa this year, I think Fournette is actually going to have the better day. So we're going to roll with Fournette on this one. When we look at RB2s, well, we have an empty spot, so that means we obviously just got to roll with Miles Sanders here, who's going against Houston. Moving right on into the wide receivers, we got A.J. Brown in Philly going against Houston versus Robert Woods in Tennessee going against KC. Ooh, you got to roll with the hot hand on this one, Mr. A.J. Brown. Come on down, dude. Houston not doing so well. Philly, on the other hand, they are rolling. Moving into wide receiver 2, we have Mr. Rondell Moore in Arizona as they take on Geno Smith and Seattle versus George Pickens, who's on a bye. So actually, this one's got to go straight to Mr. Rondell Moore. Moving into the tight ends, we got Bobby Tunyon in Green Bay going against Detroit versus Hunter Henry, and the Patriots going against Indy. Oof. I'm going to roll with Bobby Tunyon on this one, despite the fact this could very much blow up in my face. The offense for Green Bay sucks right now. And Tunyon's also had been regressed. Offensive line has regressed, which means Rodgers has not had enough time to really throw that ball out as much as he did last year. So he is definitely seen some regression. But if there's any sort of positive silver lining for him, he's been at least targeted a little bit more frequently. So that's, I guess, a silver lining. Hunter Henley is still kind of just capped on that strange kind of enigma of the Pats team right now, since they kind of a carousel of QBs. Moving into the flex position, we got T. Higgins and Cincy going against Carolina versus Romeo Doubs and Green Bay going against Detroit. Oof. T. Higgins has been a big benefactor of their offense this season. I was like, but this is going against Detroit. But it's you know what? I think probably T. Higgins might actually have the better day here. Carolina is, not the greatest defense. Yo, what's going on, Skate? How we doing, bro? Much love as always. Appreciate you stopping in, saying hi. How are we doing, bro? It's great to see you. We sitting here chit-chatting on our, fantasy team, fantasy league stuff. All right, let's see. T. Higgins able to get... yes, sir, they won today against Detroit. T. Higgins I think will probably have the better night going against Carolina. Carolina defense is not that great. The only reason why I say this because even though Romeo Doubs has been building much more of a repertoire with Rodgers, it's just so hard to really tell who's going to have the big game in that Packers offense as of late. I know we're going against Detroit, but still, that's going to be brutal. Yeah, Packers lost. It's brutal. There's no way we go to playoffs. Playoffs, dude. We got big problems. Moving into the defenses, let's see. We got the Cowboys who are on bye, so actually that matchup goes straight to the Patriots unless they get subbed out. And lastly, we got the kickers. Nick Folk in New England going against the Colts, while Mason Crosby, and Green Bay will go against Detroit. Ooh, this is actually going to be a close one. Nick Folk actually had a huge game last week. And you know what? I kind of expect the same thing this week. These two quarterbacks, these two kickers might actually throw up pretty much like the exact same stat line. Because I could totally see Green Bay being able to get stuffed and being stopped by Detroit's defense. I could totally see that happening, which Mason Crosby's got to kick field goals. But having said that, I'm totally going to roll with Nick Folk because, having said that, our special teams has also been So Nick Folk, who's coming off a very good game going against Indy's team, which hasn't been, an Indy team which hasn't been great at all. I think Nick Folk is going to have the better stat line this week. That's going to do it for that one. Okay, let's go into the next matchup. We got Mr. Deebos Nutz going against the Bajayjays. Skip to that. Which all of these should be some fire matchups. Oh, I skipped it. So then we turn that off. Turn the break it down back on. Okay. Scroll this down a little bit. There. In the battle of the quarterbacks, we got Derek Carr and the Raiders going against Jacksonville versus Mr. Kirk Cousins and the Vikings going against the Commanders. Well, this one, to me, you're gonna have to roll with Cousins on this one. Derek Carr and the Raiders have just been not good at all, while Cousins and the Vikings have been, just steamrolling pretty much everyone. So I'd look that to be more of the case when they go against the Commanders team, which just isn't very good. Into the RB1s, you got Austin Eckler and the Chargers going against Atlanta versus King Henry and the Tennessee Titans going against KC. Ooh. Call me crazy for this one, but I think Austin Eckler is going to have the bigger day here. Despite the fact King Henry's coming off a very good week last week, He does have an injury designation as it stands right now, but who knows, that could clear up before the weekend gets here. But Tennessee's offense has been pretty mediocre this year, while KC's defense has actually been pretty good. So I actually expect them to kind of bottle up that pass game that Tennessee seems to be missing a little bit. And I expect them to focus in on Henry and bottle him up. So I think that's going to open the way for Eckler to have a much better day against that Atlanta defense, which is just not doing as well either. Moving into the RB2s, we got another awesome matchup here with Travis Etienne in Jacksonville going against Las Vegas versus Alvin Kamara in New Orleans going against Baltimore. I think these two running backs are going to throw up a similar stat line. However, given the fact that Las Vegas's defense is probably a bit worse and Jacksonville's actually looking a little bit more like the real deal. I'm not like the real deal, like they're going to win everything, but they're looking better than they have the last few seasons. I think Etienne's probably going to have a slightly better better game than Alvin Kamara. I know Kamara went off for 3 touchdowns last week, but New Orleans, but that Baltimore defense is pretty decent, so that'll be a good test for him. But I totally expect that one to blow up in my face. I feel like every time I'm just like, you know what, I'm gonna make a pick. It sometimes blows up in my face, but hey, that's why it's all speculation, right? Moving into wide receivers, we got Ty Freak and the Dolphins going against Chicago versus Pittman and the Colts going against New England. You gotta roll with Ty Freak, who is just having a phenomenal season with Tua. Moving into wide receiver 2, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit going against Green Bay versus Allen Lazard in Green Bay going against Detroit. Ironically enough, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown will have the better day. I think, like I said, I think Green Bay's offense is doesn't have too much of an identity right now. It's like we run, but then we abandon the run and we don't throw to one player because we don't have, a wide number 1 wide receiver or a solid number 1 wide receiver. Whereas every time we play Detroit, they always play us hard and we can't seem to get our shit together. So I expect some interesting shit from Detroit. I expect Amon-Ra to have the better stat line. In the tight ends, we got Hayden Hurst and Cincy going against Carolina versus Taysom Hill in New Orleans going against Baltimore. I think I would have to roll with Hayden Hurst here, because it's going against that Carolina defense, not very good, and that New Orleans offense is just kind of too hit or miss to really be able to tell if to be like, you know what, Taysom's a perfect must start, but okay, moving into the flex position. This is a good matchup. We got Jalen Waddle in Miami going against Chicago versus Kenneth Walker in Seattle going against Arizona. Kenneth Walker has been having a fantastic season as well. Going against a Arizona defense that ranks middle of the pack. Jalen Waddle coming off a huge game last week. Another person that's having a fantastic season. Going against Chicago. Oof. I think, you know what? But this is against Chicago, though. Man, this one's hard. Very hard decision here. Well, I think I might roll with Kenneth Walker on this one. Even though Chicago's defense is probably much worse than Arizona's, I just think that, Tua's also been showing the ability to throw to both Tyreek and Waddle in the same game and have them both have, very good days. So it could be a day where that happens again. But I'm still going to roll with Walker anyways for having the better stat line against Arizona. Just because I think Tyreek might be the focus. Moving into, this guy has really jumped up on all of the Dolphins here. Anyways, for the battle of the defenses here, we got the Dolphins going against Chicago versus the Bengals going against Carolina. Ooh. Man, this one's kind of hard as well. Bengals defense not doing quite as good, but the saving grace is that they are going against Carolina. However, Carolina is rolling with PJ Walker, who, looked pretty good last week. And then we got the Dolphins taking on Fields and Chicago, and they have also been, it's been kind of a rough season for the Bear fans. But you know what? I think we're going to roll with Dolphins. Just purely based on that matchup. And moving into the kickers, we got Mr. Ryan Suckup in Tampa going against the Rams versus Evan McPherson and Cincy going against Carolina. Actually, I think this might be a game where McPherson will have... Well, this could be a similar stat line because Suckup, I could see a lot of field goals in this game too. But I think McPherson might actually end up with the better stat line than Suckup will. Okay, that's going to do it for that matchup. So let's move into our next matchup on the week, which is Bob's Burgers taking on the new number 3 overall top dog in Destinooooooooo. Let's take a look at how this matchup is set, Preview. Okay, so we have Jared Goff in Detroit taking on Green Bay versus Patrick Mahomes taking on Tennessee. Oh, you got to go Mahomes on this one. Tennessee's defense is not that great. Mahomes looking very good this season, almost in some MVP talks. While Goff throwing oh my God, Detroit has been turning the ball over a lot. Do not have a very good record. But I will expect Mahomes to have a better stat line. Moving into running back ones. Looks like only one of these running backs actually qualified, so we got to go straight to Josh Jacobs, who's taking on Jacksonville, who, that's actually a good matchup anyways. Moving into the RB2s, we got Jamal Williams in Detroit going against Green Bay versus Khalil Herbert in Chicago going against Miami. Although both of these running backs will actually do some damage, and technically they are both number 2 running backs. I think Jamal Williams will have the better day. I've heard rumors that DeAndre Swift is going to be out this game, and Green Bay is not very good against the run. So I think Jamal Williams will have the better day. Moving into wide receiver 1, assuming DK Metcalf can play on the opposite side, we got Scary Terry in Washington taking on Minnesota versus DK Metcalf in Seattle taking on Arizona. I think DK might actually have the better stat line here. Even with Geno thrown to him, I don't believe... I think that Minnesota defense is going to kind of be all over the Commanders. And be all over Taylor Heineke. Although I do expect Terry to get some points, I don't expect him to have more than DK by the end of the day. Moving into wide receiver 2s, we got Christian Kirk in Jacksonville going against Las Vegas versus Juju and KC going against Tennessee. Oof. This is another good one. This one might be kind of a ballsy one, but I'm actually going to roll with Christian Kirk on this one. He's one of the best wide receivers that Jacksonville's got, and they're going up against a Vegas defense that didn't score, that allowed a lot of points, but also a Vegas team that did not score very many points, any points last week. Opposite side, only reason I'm not saying Juju is just because there's so many mouths to feed. Mostly point and center. Look at the big name right below Juju here in Travis Kelce. I was like, he's gonna, that man's gonna eat and always be eating into the target share regardless. Moving into the tight ends. Speaking of which, we got Travis Kelce also taking on Tennessee versus TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota taking on Washington. I expect actually Kelce to have the better stat line, just because this will be Hawkinson's first complete game with Minnesota. So he probably, I'm going to assume that he hasn't built up much of a repertoire yet with Kirk. So that's why I think Travis will have probably the better stat line. Moving into the flex position, Chris Olave in New Orleans versus Baltimore versus Cole Kmet in Chicago versus Miami. Definitely got to roll with Olave on this one, who's been pretty much the Saints' de facto #1 wide receiver and being the stellar rookie sensation that they've had. Versus Cole Kmet, who, quite frankly, I think he's literally just scored his first touchdown of the season last week. So, yeah, I think I'm going to roll with Chris Olave on this one. Moving into the defenses, we got the Saints going against Baltimore versus the Baltimore. So that's funny. We got the two opposing teams. I think I'm going to roll with the Ravens defense on this one. I think they're a little bit better. I think they'll be able to contain Mr. Andy Dalton a little bit better. But hey, I am prepared to be 100% wrong on that one. Then lastly, in our battle of the kickers, we got Justin Tucker taking on New Orleans versus Harrison Butker and KC taking on Tennessee. Just because I think there's more uncertainty. Well, there's probably a decent amount of uncertainty at Tennessee and KC game, but I don't know. Something's telling me to roll with Tucker here because it's Justin Tucker. But also, New Orleans has shown that they can beat some people. I know, granted, one of the teams that they shut out was the Raiders. That's not really saying too much, but that'll be a good one. So I think Justin Tucker might just edge out Harrison Butker at the end of the day. Mr. Lame Tanks taking on CeeDeez Nuts. So starting with our QBs, we've got Tua and the Dolphins going against Chicago versus Josh Allen and Buffalo going against the Jets. I think I'm going to roll Tua on this one purely based on the matchup. Chicago, that defense, and that team just in general has not been that great this season, while the Jets have actually shown that they could beat some opponents and hang in there. That defense also looking much better, so I think they'll give Josh Allen a little bit more trouble, but I still expect Tua to have the better day. Moving into RB1s, we got the Joe Mixon and Cincy taking on Carolina versus Jonathan Taylor and Indy versus New England. And I've heard that Jonathan Taylor might actually miss this game with an ankle injury. He does have that injury questionable designation right now. It's been a very much down season for him, which is a shame because, got to show the shout out to the Wisconsin alum. But I think in this week, Joe Mixon by default is pretty much going to have the better day going against Carolina. Then moving into the RB2s, we've got Dameon Pierce in Houston taking on Philly, while DeAndre Swift in Detroit take on Green Bay. And like I said before, I've been hearing rumors that DeAndre Swift is going to sit, so that would leave it to Pierce. However, assuming Swift can play, I would totally give it to Swift because that going against Philly right now does not seem very wise, especially when you're on a mediocre Houston team as is. But if DeAndre Swift can't play, then obviously you got to roll Dameon Pierce. But moving into wide receiver ones, we've got Tyler Lockett in Seattle taking on Arizona versus Cooper Kupp and the Rams going against Tampa. I don't know. I still think that the Tampa defense is pretty decent, and I'm not sold on Matt Stafford at all. So I think Tyler Lockett, if he plays, will have the better stat line going against that Arizona team. Like I said, is pretty mediocre, and I think Lockett scored a bomb last week too. So it may not be a very big difference in stat line, but just because of how poorly the Rams have been playing this season, it's hard to tell with Kupp. Moving to the next matchup, we got DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona taking on Seattle versus Tyler Boyd and Cincy taking on Carolina. It's been kind of a down season, hasn't it, for Boyd? Not many. Let's see. 27, 6, 12, 29, 12. Alright, so maybe not. DeAndre Hopkins just came back, instantly elevated to the Cardinals' #1 wide receiver. But playing against a kind of tough Seattle defense, while Cincy, despite playing way under what they should be, is going against a pretty much abysmal Carolina team. Having said that, can't go against D. Hopkins. especially because it's only his second game back, so I think he'll have the better stat line. Moving into the tight ends, we got Mr. Zach Ertz and Arizona taking on Seattle versus Kyle Pitts and Atlanta taking on the Chargers. You know, I'm going to roll with Kyle Pitts on this one. Hopefully, since he scored last week, this will be kind of starting to light a fire in him and kind of give him some of that confidence. Yeah, that's hopefully we'll see some more Kyle Pitts. Moving into the flex position, we got Mike Evans in Tampa going against the Rams versus Devin Singletary and Buffalo taking on the Jets. I know the Buffalo just signed Nyheim Hines, so that might actually play a factor into how many snaps Singletary gets. So based on that, I think I'm going to roll with Mike Evans, assuming, you know, Brady can even get it to him and that he plays. Moving into the defenses, we've got the Eagles taking on Detroit versus the Packers, or the Eagles taking on Houston versus the Packers taking on Detroit. Ooh. This could... I think these defenses will put up a similar stat line. But it's Houston though, and that Eagles team is no joke. So I think, and I've been upset too many times with the Packer one to confidently say that we'll whoop Detroit. So I think we'll go with the Eagles to have a better stat line. Then finally we have in our kickers, we got Young-Ho Koo in Atlanta taking on the Chargers versus Matt Gay and the Rams taking on Tampa. I think Matt Gay might have the better stat line. It might be a little bit, not really a shootout, but like we're a point to where Stafford and the Rams can only get to like a little bit 3/4 of the way downfield before everything kind of sputters out. While Young-Ho Koo, I'm kind of expecting that the Chargers might not like blow them out, but have the ball most of the time. Champ Cheese and the last place team Breeki. And I know you all are amazed as this is team as match of the week written all over it. It really doesn't. I'm just joking. But here is how it breaks down. So we have Kyler Murray, starting off as usual, I should say, is Kyler Murray and Arizona taking on Seattle versus Jalen Hurts and Philly taking on Houston. Gotta roll Jalen on this one because that Houston defense is not good at all. Jalen Hurts, he's been having a phenomenal season. Kyler Murray, up and down season, and going against a division rival is going to be an interesting one. So I'm going to roll Jalen on this one. Moving into the RB1s, we got Dalvin Cook in Minnesota going against Washington versus Cam Akers and the Rams. Well, since Cam Akers pretty much has not been playing for the Rams, I would expect pretty much another goose egg out of him. So I would expect Dalvin Cook to win this matchup here. Then in the RB2s, we have Dante Foreman in Carolina going against Cincinnati versus Aaron Jones in Green Bay going against Detroit. Oof. You got to roll with Aaron Jones on this one. Detroit, like I said, not a very good team, not a very good defense. But Aaron Jones has been actually having, out of the two running backs, he's been having a better year than stat-wise than A.J. Dillon has been. Although I do expect Dante Foreman to have a good day out against Cincinnati, since Cincy's defense has not been that great. Moving into wide receiver ones, we got Justin Jefferson in Minnesota going against the Commanders versus Stephon Diggs in Buffalo going against the Jets. Ooh, Sauce Gardner going against Stephon. You know what? I think Justin Jefferson is gonna. I think Justin Jefferson's gonna go off against that Commanders defense. Well, I think Sauce Gardner is going to step up and be the real deal and lock down Stephon Diggs. In wide receiver matchup 2, we got Gabe Davis in Buffalo taking on the Jets, while Devontae Adams and the Raiders take on Jacksonville. Assuming Tay can play, I think Devontae Adams is going to have the better stat line here. That Jacksonville defense, despite being better, still pretty much middle of the pack. But we'll see. That Raiders offense is anemic. Then when we go into the tight ends, we got Tyler Higbee and the Rams going against Tampa versus Pat Freiermuth. Actually, it's not against anyone because Pat Freiermuth and Pittsburgh are on a bye, so this goes to Higbee. Moving into the flex spot, Devontae Smith and Philly going against Houston versus Allen Robinson and the Rams going against Tampa. I think in this one I'd have to roll with, just purely based on the matchup and whoever they're going against, Devontae Smith and Houston. There's been several times where Hurts has been able to ball out and have both A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith have big days. So going against the Houston defense, which isn't particularly like that great, I think Devontae Smith will have the better stat line than Robinson. Moving into the defenses, we have the Vikings taking on Washington, while the Bills take on the Jets. This one's kind of tough. If the Jets continue to play like they have been, I think the Vikings will actually put up a better stat line, just because of who they're going against by the nature of it and going against the Commanders. Although I could totally see a world where Tyler Heineke goes off and destroys the Vikings, and the Jets hold. I mean, I don't think the Jets will win that game, but the Jets hold the Bills to like a lower amount, so could see that. And lastly, we got Jason Myers in Seattle taking on Arizona versus Daniel Carlson and the Raiders taking on Jacksonville. I think Jason Myers in this one might actually have potential. Like I said, that Raiders offense is pretty fucking anemic. So who knows? You could see a lot of punts from them, just like they were able to put up no points last week. While Jason Myers, who's quietly having a very good season, you could see a decent amount of field goals, especially if drives stall out in that Seattle and Arizona game. All right. Let's switch it to preview. Cham Cheese and Team Breeki. Yeah, I think that was it. All right. We did it. We did it, y'all. So, I want to thank you all. That is going to, kind of conclude this another episode of Fantasy Haus Live. We covered the review of the week, went over the updated power rankings, and we took a nice little deep dive into the next week. And I hope you guys were enjoying it. I hope to see you guys very soon, and thank you very much for hanging out. I will see you guys next time.